Well, we know how busy this time of year is, in particular for my pal Blake Murphy, as him and Matt Bonner break down all things NBA trade deadline. Note the time, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern on Sportsnet 360 with the deadline at 3 p.m. Blake joins me now. Blake also a 90s kid, so I'm sure he knows all the words to I'll Be There For You, the theme song to Friends, and maybe also the trade deadline motto for these Toronto Raptors, who could lend a hand in a number of different ways to other teams to facilitate deals. Can you walk us through some of those options?
First of all, what a setup. Unbelievable. That was terrific.
Thank you.
Yes, I can walk you through it. So the Raptors have a couple things in their favor. They have about $10 million in space beneath the luxury tax to take on extra salary from other teams. They have a trade exception that's about $13 million. They could take a player in. And they have a bunch of really good players on pretty team-friendly, usually expiring contracts. So all that's pretty helpful. That sets you up for one of three types of trades. One is you just make a basketball trade and get a guy you think is a part of the core. That's a little harder to predict. A second one we saw today with the 76ers paying 2 second-round picks to send KJ Martin to Detroit. Maybe you do something like that. Maybe it's Pat Connaughton from the Bucks. And then the third one is, hey, someone's trying to get, say, a Jimmy Butler deal done, a Kevin Durant deal done, and they need to make the math work. Raptors swoop in with some of that flexibility and help out there, pick up a couple seconds for their trouble.
Maybe a third or a fourth team in something more complex. Like the Raptors, the Wizards would like to collect as many draft picks as possible. We saw Jonas Valanciunas go to the Kings, rejoining DeMar DeRozan, which you like to see.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah,
very fun.
Everyone's happy to see JV freed from the Wizards at this current point. But there was also a trade that we saw Kyle Kuzma come the way of the Bucks, while the Bucks send Chris Middleton back to Washington. How is this working, and does this surprise you?
It definitely surprised me. It's a bit of an interesting one. Kyle Kuzma has not been particularly good this year. He's not the shooter that Chris Middleton is. Certainly doesn't have the chemistry with Giannis that Middleton does. But I think the Bucks are looking at this and saying, well, Kuzma's cheaper. He's on a descending contract, so for future years, maybe it's a little easier to work. And if you look back to that championship Lakers team, he was actually a pretty good third or fourth option. He stepped the defense up. Maybe getting him out of Washington helps here. If you're the Wizards, you're taking on Middleton's $34 million for next year, but you're getting A.J. Johnson for it. That gives them 4 of the first-round picks from this past year's draft as they start to rebuild. And they get a 2028 pick swap, which, if you're not all that bullish on the future for the Bucks, whether with Giannis or in a post-Giannis environment, you have a chance to swap picks with them in 2028. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, it feels like the most interesting nugget is how the Bucks will grow from this. It's so dependent on how Kuzma thrives in that environment and what other dominoes could potentially fall.
Got to knock down some shots and got to defend at a better level than anyone on the Wizards has this year.
That is a fact. All right, as for here today, we'll see what the Raptors can do against a very tough Grizzlies squad who know how to knock them down. They've scored 100-plus points in every single game this season. Nothing about that screams 90s. Those throwback games were all about defense, but the Raptors got that on lock these last 2 weeks. We've got final thoughts coming up on Raptors Central.